I have one challenge for this week: to create cosplay props for my friends. Should be easy enough. The plan is to 3D model them in Blender, then 3D print them, and finally sand and paint them. The only issue is, I haven't 3D modeled anything in years, and my 3D printer has been sitting in the closet collecting dust, so I don't even know if it's gonna work. And I only have a week before my friends need their props, so let's see how this goes. To back up real quick, I can talk about what I'm actually supposed to be making. My two best friends are huge fans of Chikawa. If you don't know, Chikawa is a manga and anime series about adorable critters navigating daily life and adulthood. Chikawa and their friends work jobs, battle social anxiety, and generally uplift each other when things don't always go to plan. My friends are planning on cosplaying Chikawa themselves and their best friend Hachiware. Those two characters also occasionally work as demon hunters, and they use these adorable little prodding sticks, which are the subject of my challenge. I'm gonna bring these mini weapons to life so my friends can use them in their cosplay. Now, it's usually best practice to sketch out a design before jumping straight into 3D modeling, but the weapons are so simple that I just eyeballed it, to be perfectly honest. Not to mention the time constraint, I needed to start on the model immediately. As a reminder, it's been several years since I've modeled anything, especially with the intention to 3D print it. So if you've come here for a Blender lesson, you're gonna be sorely disappointed because I struggled heavily on this part. It definitely took me a while to get warmed up, and I expended an incredible amount of time and effort on what should have been a simple design. But I at least had an idea of the shapes I wanted to use going into it. The plan was to use a cylinder as the shaft of the weapon, which is pretty self-explanatory. Then I would create and modify a torus or a donut shape for the top of the weapon. If you cut the donut in half, you get a U shape, which is the perfect starting point for the shape that I needed. The absolute hardest part about this entire 3D model was connecting the U shape to the shaft. I knew it would be the trickiest part, so I wasn't worried when it took forever. I didn't have a super solid plan for this, so I just let myself mess around and experiment with moving vertices until I could comfortably join the two pieces into one object. With the pieces joined, I moved on to the last part of the design, which was creating the spikes. While all of this was happening, I also used a mirror modifier to make sure the design was perfectly symmetrical, which also saved me some time. I kept the mirror modifier active for this part, so I would only have to model the spikes on one prong of the weapon, and it would automatically be mirrored on the other side. I marked out a square or face where each spike would go, and I used the Loop Tools add-on to turn each square into a circle. I made sure each circle was oriented the same way, then I grabbed the vertice in the middle of each circle and pulled it out to create each spike. With the spikes out of the way, the model was nearly complete. I finalized it by adding a subdivision surface modifier to make the model smooth instead of blocky. But the modifier smoothed some parts way too much, so I used creases and bevels to sharpen up certain areas, like the spikes. Finally, I applied the mirror modifier and joined the two mirrored halves together. And with that, the model was finished! I imported my model into a slicer program to prepare it for printing. This is where I decided how big I wanted it to be, what sorts of supports would be required, and how fast I wanted it to print. I wanted the model to take up the maximum amount of space my printer would allow. Theoretically, I could have cut the model up into multiple parts to make it bigger, but I didn't have a lot of time to glue or fuse parts together, so I just printed each prop as one object. This will be a very cute, handheld size prop, not anywhere close to a life-size weapon. With the slicing done, we move on to printing. This is the part I was dreading the most. Not because it's difficult, but because so many things can go wrong. My printer might not even turn on for all I know. Or the 3D print could fail at any step of the way. The extruder could spit out plastic spaghetti, or the print could come off the build plate halfway through. If the calibration isn't accurate, the 3D layers could shift around and ruin the hours of hard work I spent modeling. Everything was on the line, and I needed this print to go smoothly. I loaded the model onto the printer, and in an act of hubris, I didn't even run a test print. I dusted off the build plate and hit go. And somehow, through perhaps some act of divine mercy by the 3D printing gods, it printed flawlessly. I was amazed. This definitely goes to show the quality of Prusa printers, given that my model from 2017 or so ran without a hitch. No calibration, no testing, just a perfect print straight out of the closet. Remind me to take better care of my printer, since she's been so good to me. With the first prop done, I ran the print again with no issue. After about 6 hours, I had both props in my hands and ready for the final step. This was the part I thought would be the easiest, but I couldn't have been more wrong. I started by using pliers to remove the support material from both props. The supports left behind quite a lot of rough edges that I wasn't too fond of. I began by sanding the entire prop front to back to try and even it out as much as possible. After lots of sanding, I realized there were a few holes that would need to be filled with something. Normally I would use wood filler for this, but I didn't have any at the time, so I did some research to see if there was anything around my house that I could use. Lo and behold, I learned that combining super glue and baking powder can create a hard material that is perfect for filling small holes in 3D prints. So I decided to test this method out. I was actually kind of shocked that it worked so well. I got baking powder absolutely everywhere, but it worked! I used this concoction to fill all the gaps and holes, and I fear I may have overfilled some areas, because this made the next part way harder. Sanding. Sanding, sanding, sanding forever and ever. I was sanding these prints for days trying to file down the superglue mixture. For the sanding, I used a mix of sandpaper and sanding blocks, which are just sandpaper attached to a piece of foam. It genuinely took so long, and I wasn't even able to get them as smooth as I wanted. But alas, time was not on my side, so eventually I just had to call it good enough and move on to painting. I started with a coat of gray primer as a base to work off of. Then I went in with many coats of acrylic paint. Pink for Chikawa and blue for Hachiware. The painting also took a very long time, and I was definitely frustrated that it wasn't as easy as I thought it was going to be. The spikes on each weapon are white as opposed to the base color, and I had a lot of problems getting the border between the spikes and the base to be clean. The spikes were super hard to paint, and I ended up redoing them countless times. I trapped myself in a cycle of painting the spikes in white, and then painting too much white, so then going back with the base color, and then doing too much of that, and then going back to white for the spikes over and over. And there are 12 spikes on each weapon. The clock was striking down on me though, because my friends needed the props the next morning. I didn't have time to be a perfectionist. I would much rather have an imperfect something than a perfect nothing. So I did my best to make everything as clean as possible. Looking up close, it's easy to see all the imperfections eating away at me, but once I took a moment to step back and look at my handiwork from afar, it actually looked really good. After the torture of sanding and painting and driving myself crazy, it was such a breath of fresh air to realize I actually did it. The last thing I did was apply a clear coat of glossy varnish to seal the paint and protect the props. And with that, the Chikawa weapons were finally complete and ready to be handed off. I could have never guessed that such a simple little project would have taken me on this adventure. I haven't made 3D art in a long time, and it felt amazing to get back into it. I definitely feel inspired to keep 3D modeling and maybe even continuing to print things. I don't know what I'll print next, but I am excited to find out, and hopefully I will see you next time.